The giant, the infection, and the rookie from hell. We start at a nursing home with Paul Edgecombe, who's apparently so sharp and independent that his morning highlight is requesting 2 pieces of dry toast. Thrilling stuff, Paul. He decides to sneak out for a mountain hike, because that's exactly what 100-year-olds should be doing alone. But he gets caught by an orderly who apparently hates following safety protocols and just lets him go. Later, the nursing home crew is watching Top Hat, and Paul starts leaking from his eyes. His friend Elaine tries to comfort him, and suddenly we're hitting a 60-year flashback to the Great Depression. Paul was the head guard on the Green Mile, the death row block. It's called the Green Mile because of the floor tiles. Very creative, guys. They also have an electric chair named Old Sparky, because when you're in the business of state-sponsored zapping, you might as well give the furniture a cute nickname. The blood overs the beast. The year is 1935, and Paul has a bladder infection that's clearly winning the war. Instead of seeing a doctor like a sane person, he decides to suffer through it at work because a new inmate is arriving. Enter John Coffey. This man is absolute unit, so big he makes the other guards look like they belong in a middle school play. Escorting him is Percy, the human equivalent of a wet paper towel with a god complex. He's short, arrogant, and clearly only has the job because his uncle is the governor. He's the kind of guy who thinks holding a baton makes him a superhero. Paul asks the barefoot giant if he's going to be trouble, and Coffey, who could literally snap the entire staff like dry twigs, just looks terrified and asks if they leave the lights on at night. Sir, you are 7 feet tall and accused of a double homicide. The dark should be afraid of you. Percy being a menace. Percy immediately proves he's the worst by breaking the fingers of an inmate named Dell just because Dell laughed at him. Very professional, Percy. 10-10 prison management. Paul finally kicks him off the block and realizes John Coffey is mentally challenged. He explains his name is Coffee, like the drink, only not spelled the same. Paul reads the file, and it's grim. 2 little sisters were snatched, and the town found Coffey holding their bodies, crying like he'd just realized what happened. The warden, Hal Moores, shows up looking stressed because his wife, Melinda, has brain-shattering headaches. Meanwhile, Paul is trying to figure out how to get rid of Percy, who is only hanging around because he wants to watch someone die up close. You know, normal hobby stuff. A fearless mouse and a fragile ego. At home, Paul's bladder is still screaming at him, and he's wondering how God allows crimes like Coffey's to happen. Back at the prison, a mouse, who clearly has more balls than Percy, just wanders into the hallway. Percy goes on a murderous rampage, trying to stomp the tiny creature but fails miserably. The guards let him tire himself out because watching Percy fail is the only joy they have in this depressing hallway. Paul eventually has to check Percy, telling him that if he crosses the line again, they're ready to lose their jobs just to give him the beating he deserves. Honestly, Paul, I'd have paid for that ticket. The dress rehearsal for death. We move into the rehearsal for an execution. They use an old janitor to play the prisoner, who spends the whole time cracking dirty jokes while they strap him in. Nothing says professionalism like mocking a death machine with "your mom" jokes. Paul scolds them, but we all know it's just a coping mechanism for the fact that their job involves frying people. They explain the wet sponge trick, putting it under the cap to make the electricity travel faster and kill the prisoner quickly. It's a humane way to turn someone into a human fuse. Percy watches this with a look on his face that suggests he's found his new personality. We pick up with the execution of Bitterbuck. Before he goes, he tells Paul his version of heaven, a 1930s camping trip with his wife where she's glowing in the light. Paul nods along, probably thinking about how his own version of heaven is just being able to pee without crying. The execution itself is a mess. Screams, a second jolt. The works. It's basically a high-voltage horror show, and Percy's takeaway is to mutter, "So long, Chief," like he's a background extra in a noir film. Read the room, Percy. The mouse who won the lottery. The next day, the fearless mouse makes a comeback. He wanders into Dell's cell, and Dell, who is literally on death row, decides this is his new best friend. He names him Mr. Jingles. This mouse is apparently a Mensa candidate because he starts doing circus tricks with a thread spool. Percy, being the joy vacuum he is, actually seems impressed for 5 seconds before offering the mouse an empty cigar box. Don't trust him, Dell. He's the guy who breaks fingers for sport. Enter Wild Bill and the end of Paul's bladder. A new inmate arrives, William Wild Bill Wharton. He's a charming fellow who murdered 3 people, including a pregnant woman. When he shows up, he's acting like a drugged-out zombie, but the second he hits the mile, he snaps. He headbutts Percy, which honestly, thank you, and nearly strangles Dean. Paul tries to help, but he gets a direct hit to his infected groin and collapses. If the bladder infection was winning before, it just scored a knockout. The miracle spit. While Paul is dying on the floor, John Coffey decides it's time for a house call. He grabs Paul through the bars and puts his massive hand right on the infection site. The light bulbs flare up like a disco, and then Coffey starts hacking up a cloud of black ash that looks like sentient chimney soot. Paul stumbles to the bathroom and realizes he's been factory reset. He's reborn. He's got the bladder of a teenager. He celebrates by visiting Coffey's lawyer, who basically says, "Yeah, he's a sweet guy, but he's also a rabid dog." Not helpful, counselor. Paul brings John some cornbread as a thanks for the miracle snack, while Wild Bill spends his time spitting in Paul's face and getting blasted with a fire hose. A typical Tuesday on the Green Mile. The mouse circus and the wet floor incident. Dell's execution is looming, so the guards, who are clearly losing their minds, put on a fake circus scout performance to convince Dell that Mr. Jingles is going to a mouse city called Mooseyville. Dell buys it because, at this point, why not? But then, disaster strikes. The spool drops, Mr. Jingles chases it, and Percy stomps him, just flat out crushed. Dell is screaming, the guards are horrified, and Percy just walks away, like he didn't just murder the only thing keeping an inmate sane. But wait, Coffey grabs the broken little body, breathes some magic onto it, and poof, the mouse is back. Percy is convinced it's a magic trick, and Paul tells him he's as bad at killing mice as he is at everything else. Burn. The most judgmental execution ever. The night of Dell's execution arrives. Dell is calm, thinking about Mooseyville, until Percy decides to be the ultimate villain. Right before the switch, he leans in and tells Dell that Mouseyville was a lie. That's just a story these guys told you. Wow, Percy, you really are a special kind of garbage. To make it worse, Percy doesn't wet the sponge. He just pretends to. Paul notices too late. The switch is pulled, and instead of a quick death, Dell literally cooks in the chair. It's a screaming, flaming disaster. Coffey is in his cell feeling the pain, and Wild Bill is literally cheering like he's at a football game. When it's finally over, the room smells like a burnt BBQ, and Percy has the audacity to say, "I didn't know." Paul's boss, Hal, is furious, but Paul covers for Percy just to keep their get-lost-forever deal on track. The jailbreak, the tumour, and the gift that keeps on giving. We open with Melinda, the warden's wife, who is apparently spending her weekends shouting curses like a sailor because of a brain tumour. Paul has a brilliant idea. Let's break a convicted double murderer out of death row for a quick house call. The other guards are stunned, but Paul's like, "Trust me, his spit is medicinal." They dose Wild Bill with enough sedative to drop a rhino and put Percy in a straitjacket and a gag, which honestly is the most peaceful Percy has been the entire movie. Dean stays behind to man the mile. which is prison speak for, I have a mortgage and can't go to jail with you guys. The night shift at Hal's house, John Coffey steps outside and is immediately fascinated by grass. It's a touching moment, except they're technically committing multiple felonies. They arrive at Hal's place, and Hal greets them with a shotgun, a reasonable reaction when your co-workers show up at midnight with a giant in shackles. John heads straight for Melinda, leans in for a magic kiss, and the house starts shaking like a 7.0 earthquake. He sucks the tumor right out of her, but this time he doesn't cough up the magic soot. He holds it in. He's like a human Brita filter that's reached its limit. Melinda wakes up, feels great, and gives John a St. Christopher medal. It's a beautiful moment, followed by the guards awkwardly shuffling a dying giant back into a laundry truck. The ultimate Uno reverse card. Back at the prison, they let Percy out of his time out. He's still a jerk, but not for long. John grabs him, pulls him to the bars, and exhales all that stored up tumor smoke directly into Percy's mouth. Percy goes full zombie, walks down the mile, and empties his revolver into Wild Bill. 6 shots. Wild Bill is dead, and Percy's brain is officially fried. He's transferred to a mental hospital as a patient, which is exactly where he wanted to work anyway. Dreams do come true, Percy. John then gives Paul a vision via a handshake. Turns out, Wild Bill was the one who killed the little girls. John tried to take it back, but he was too late. So the man they're about to execute is actually a walking miracle, and the guy they just buried was a monster. Great system you guys have there. The final flicker show. Paul realized he's about to fry a saint and asks John if he wants to escape. John's response, "Nah, I'm tired, boss." He's tired of people being mean, tired of the pain, and honestly, probably tired of the prison food. For his last request, he wants to see a flicker show. They watch Top Hat, and John thinks the dancers look like angels. It's the most emotional movie night in history, right before the most depressing execution in history. Old Sparky's last stand. The day arrives. The girl's parents are in the gallery shouting that he should die twice. Dean is crying, the guards are shaking, and John asks for one thing: don't put the hood on. He's still afraid of the dark. Paul has to give the order. He takes John's hand one last time, feeling the gift one more time, and then zap. John is gone. Paul puts the medal back on John's neck, and the guards basically quit the death row business forever. Can't blame them. 108 years and counting. Back in the present, Paul reveals to Elaine that he's 108 years old. He takes her to a cabin where Mr. Jingles is still chilling in a cigar box, looking great for a mouse that should have died during the Truman administration. Paul realizes that John's gift was actually a curse. He's outlived his wife, his kids, and now Elaine. He's the strongest man on the planet in terms of longevity, but he's just waiting for his own green mile to end. Paul and the guards knew John was innocent and holy, yet they still strapped him in and flipped the switch because that's the job. The moral? Systemic cruelty doesn't care if you're a good guy or if you're crying while you do it. If you participate in a broken system, you eventually have to live with the ghosts, and in Paul's case, he had to live with them for 108 years. Paul and the guards knew John was innocent and holy, yet they still strapped him in and flipped the switch because that's the job. The moral? Systemic cruelty doesn't care if you're a good guy or if you're crying while you do it. If you participate in a broken system, you eventually have to live with the ghosts, and in Paul's case, he had to live with them for 108 years. The moral of the story is essentially, no good deed goes unpunished, and sometimes the purest souls are the ones the world is most eager to break.